He should have said heel.
Ghoul, aka Stuart Carter Winthrop III, is one of the Jokers who followed the rejuvenated Joker. Ghoul is heavily into techno-goth music and has adapted the goth look into his costume. He mainly serves as the group's techie, manning the computers and technical equipment, but that doesn't mean he won't enter the fight. You see, Ghoul was never without his plastic Halloween pumpkin, which he kept filled with a number of monster-inspired weapons and tricks to help in said fights. And with that brief summary out the way, let me go ahead and break down how I'll be going through the movie. I will be specifically focusing on the scenes that contain Ghoul rather than going through the whole movie, so there will be some jumping around, story-wise, but just for the sake of focusing on Ghoul. And with that said, let's get right into it. During the heist at Gotham Shipping, Ghoul attempted to attack Batman but was knocked out, like 3 times. So, immediately diving into the character of Ghoul, the takeaway from this encounter with Batman is that Ghoul isn't much of a fighter, but he does have the heart of a fighter as he continues to get back up and try again. It also shows us that he isn't afraid to try, even if he knows that he'll fail. In the aftermath of the failed heist, Joker tasked Ghoul with locating another system scanner to make up for the one they lost in the earlier heist on their database. Ghoul manages to locate a list of the only other places to find the cutting-edge system scanners that they were searching for, including Wayne Enterprises, which had tight security. These scenes really show how capable Ghoul is at hacking, while also showing his overall vast knowledge of technology in general. What Ghoul lacks on the battlefield, he makes up for in intelligence, and that really separates him from the rest of the Jokers as he's the only one capable of doing these things. So, during the heist, in which Wolf and Dee Dee managed to cause a distraction, Ghoul waited outside of the security post until they were called, and while donning a gas mask, he hurled a gas grenade to immobilize the security. Choco and Ghoul were then able to locate and steal the system scanner they were after. Now, if you couldn't already tell, Ghoul is a very loose tribute to Scarecrow, and this scene really highlights that. From just his overall design to the use of the gas grenade. However, it's obviously not a fear toxin grenade, so that's where the similarities end on that front. The Jokers were later dispatched by Joker to kill Terry McGinnis. During this assassination attempt, Ghoul held Dana hostage, although she briefly got free by stomping on his right foot. When Ghoul grabs a hold of her again, she tells him to let go of her, and Ghoul lets go of Dana while sarcastically complying with "sure, cutes" by throwing her off a ledge, inflicting serious injuries on her in the process, and most likely would have killed her if Terry didn't interfere and catch her. Shortly after, Ghoul was then knocked out. The takeaway from this scene is the act of him saying "sure, cutes" and dropping Dana, as it shows both his sadistic and quote comedic side. He views the act of complying, but in a twisted way, as a joke, and because of that, it's funny to him. Reasons like this is why Ghoul is a part of the Jokers to begin with. Another thing to touch on real quick, even though it's just weird, is how he licks his lips whenever he grabs a hold of Dana. It's just weird and unsettling, and truthfully, it's very sinister, and that's probably why they did it, but it still feels weird and wrong to watch. But moving on. Ghoul and the other Jokers were later dispatched to tie up a loose end by eliminating Jordan Price. When Batman cornered them on the ship, Ghoul used his jack-o'-lantern bucket to break a window for an alternate means of escape for the gang. The main takeaway from this scene is what Ghoul tells Jordan Price, and it's not much to be honest. All Ghoul tells Jordan is,
"I just decided you're a loose end."
And loose ends should be tied up.
And all this does is circle back to the quote comedic personality that I mentioned a minute ago. But now, moving on to the last scene that we'll be looking at. When the Jokers fought Batman at their hideout, Ghoul attempted to sneak attack Batman after Wolf was driven away by Ace, but Batman managed to give him a surprise punch while facing away from him, resulting in Ghoul getting knocked out. Ghoul was presumably arrested afterwards. Like I said in the beginning, Ghoul isn't much of a fighter, but that doesn't mean he won't try, especially if he feels like he can get a sneak attack in. However, his heart can only carry him so far in his battle against Justice. There's truthfully not much to say about Ghoul other than that he's a technological genius who has heart and is sadistic. However, even with that being the case, he still manages to be my favorite character from any of the Joker gangs. But now, moving on to his design and voice actor. As I said earlier, Ghoul is a loose tribute to Scarecrow, and it really shows. From the Scarecrow stitching on him, to the brown colors, and finally the hat. Even Ghoul's blonde hair looks like the hay that scarecrows would traditionally be made out of, which is possibly a reference and or callback to Scarecrow's design in Batman the Animated Series. Overall, his design not only stands out, but it also fits the universe perfectly. And now, we'll move on to Ghoul's voice actor, with that being Michael Rosenbaum, and for those that didn't know, he played Lex Luthor on Smallville, Kid Flash in Teen Titans, Johnny Charisma in Arkham Knight, as well as Martin X in both Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and 3, and many other great roles. So huge shout out to Michael Rosenbaum. Before we get to the outro though, I have one last thing to tell y'all about Ghoul and Michael Rosenbaum. Michael Rosenbaum based the vocal inflection of Ghoul on the actor Christopher Walken. It's just a neat little detail that I thought I would share with y'all.
How am I supposed to do that?
Hit him where it hurts.
Willie Watt was your typical nerdy high schooler who was seen as an outcast at his school, going unnoticed most of the time, and when he is noticed, it's never for something good. Willie also had a long-lasting infatuation with fellow classmate Blade Summer, who truthfully couldn't even remember his name. However, that still didn't affect his feelings for her. Something else of note is that Willie's dad is verbally, mentally, and physically abusive and even encourages the negative feelings that Willie harbors inside. What this tells us is, Willie grew up in an unstable home, obviously, but this abuse is also what results in Willie's downfall, as it typically does in Batman comics and shows. With that brief summary out the way, let me go ahead and bring up the two episodes that I'll be discussing and go over how I'll break them down. The two episodes we'll be looking at are Golem and Revenant. As for the breakdown, like always, I will be specifically focusing on the scenes that involve Willie, which will possibly result in some skipping within the episodes themselves, but this is just for the sake of staying focused on Willie, his personality, and psychology. With all that said, let's get right into the episode Golem. One day, Willie volunteered to be Blade's date to the dance, but before she could even decline, their conversation was interrupted by Nelson Nash, the school bully, who immediately started hitting on Blade after showing off his esteemed car. Nelson then tossed Willie aside, who accidentally bumped into Nelson's prized possession, setting off the bully to beat the feeble nerd. Fortunately, Terry McGinnis showed up right on time to prevent said beating. After school, Willie went to his father's workplace in order to talk about what happened at school. During this conversation, Willie was constantly diminished and pushed over by his verbally abusive father, who lives by the motto, "If someone pushes, you push back." He refused to have a quote, "wuss for a son," so he demanded retribution, telling his son to hit the bully where it hurts. This lifelong abuse and frustration drove Willie to the edge, escalating him into taking his father's advice and stealing Golem to exact his revenge. As I said in the beginning, the abuse led to Willie's downfall, and it's actually sad to see the encounters between Willie and his father. We don't often get to see the sad happenings within the villains' lives, so them adding these scenes were not only nice details to the character, but they also add emotion to the character and the episode itself. So now, with Willie controlling the mechanical behemoth from a remote position, Willie headed straight for Nelson's car and crushed it like a Coca-Cola can. Shortly thereafter, Batman intervened and took on the robot. The fight ended when Willie inadvertently plunged the Golem's claw into an electrical cable, causing both the Golem and the headset Willie was wearing to short circuit. From that moment on, Willie gained the ability to control the machine telekinetically, with each reacting to the other's emotion. This is where Willie's mind would begin to collapse even further, as he now wears his heart on his sleeve, showing all emotions even when not meaning to. The next day, Willie was visibly depressed, either because he was defeated by the Batman, or because the revenge didn't satisfy him as he had expected. Willie then goes on to make this comment in response to what his dad had just said.
When I get my hands on the jerk who stole that Golem, I'm gonna make him sorry he was ever born.
Maybe he already is.
What was that?
As I said earlier, it's actually sad to see these moments because you, the viewer, are aware of the abuse he endures both at home and at school. And to just view Willie as a normal civilian for a second and not the villain that he'll become, it's honestly heartbreaking to see the poor kid not receive any kind of love or support the way he should. Even with him becoming a villain in mind, it's still sad to think about because he wasn't always a villain. So, after breakfast, Willie goes to school and things start looking up when Blade suddenly invites him to the dance at the pier later that night. The invitation, though, was a mere pretext to spite Nelson, who immediately reacted and threatened Willie. Consequently, this woke Golem, which had been impounded by the GCPD. With this connection established, Willie looked perplexed at the manifestation of his newfound powers and immediately understood what he had acquired. The Golem then broke out of the police building and started heading to Willie. This is where Willie starts getting lost in his newfound powers, as well as getting lost in his emotions, which we'll get into shortly. After school, Willie went to a tunnel to meet with Golem, who he could feel getting closer by the minute. However, before it arrived, Willie was intercepted by a gang of jokers who demanded tribute for his trespassing. Willie, now overconfident, scoffed at the hooligans as Golem entered the tunnel, scaring them away. Willie rejoiced as he thought with both Golem and Blade, things were finally improving for him. However, this happiness was not to last. At the dance, Willie was snubbed by Blade, who quickly fell under the charm of Nelson. The bully then took Willie outside and told him to stay away from Blade. Willie stood firm and defied Nelson, who then pushed him down the pier. The Golem immediately reacted to this and set off the tin to its other half. The disgruntled and empowered Willie headed right back to the party and summoned the Golem, running a rampage all over the amusement park. During this rampage, Willie was once again intercepted by the Batman. Before Willie could have his fun, however, Willie's father, who had seen the machine headed that way, interrupted the quarrel. At that point, Willie turned his attention in wrath onto his abusive father. And this is what I was referring to earlier when I brought up Willie getting lost in his emotions. After all the years of abuse, all the years of neglect, Willie has finally snapped and is now doing exactly what his father told him to do, which is, when someone pushes you, you push back. The only problem for his father is, he's the main one that's been pushing Willie, in multiple meanings. Seeing his father here amplified every negative emotion he was already feeling and caused him to get lost in his rage. So much so that he himself no longer views his father as his father.
But he's your father. Not for long.
However, Batman torpedoed Willie's attempt to murder his father and finally destroyed the colossal robot by making it collide with a condor ride. Willie then mourned the loss of his other half, breaking down into tears. Afterwards, Willie was sentenced to 3 years in juvenile hall, where he would develop his telekinetic powers in the subsequent months. And that about wraps up the first episode. So now, we'll be moving on to the second and final episode featuring Willie Watt, with that being Revenant. Forsaken by his family and colleagues, Willie found a way to kill time. He hit the weight machines and acquired a bulkier and more intimidating physique. No longer being the scrawny oddball he once was, Willie imprinted uneasiness on everyone around him, including the guards. Now, I am telling this out of order here because we don't actually get to see Willie within the episode for a while. But when we do, we see that Willie is no longer the same nerdy and timid person he once was. He no longer walks with his head down out of fear of being bullied, as he himself is now the bully. At some point, Willie moved on to vandalize Hamilton Hill High School, plaguing those who had beleaguered him. These inexplainable events were quickly blamed on the ghost of Garrison Jacobs. When Dana, Chelsea, and Blade tried to summon the spirit in the school's gym, they were cut short by Nelson, at which point Willie unleashed a telekinetic attack on the facility and tried to murder his old nemesis as well as Batman, who had intervened. Afterwards, Willie set off to harass his old crush, Blade, by unleashing havoc on the girl's showers and writing a eerie message on the mirror that says, "I still love you." This obviously lets us know that some part of the old Willie still remains and still harbors feelings for Blade. Sadly, Willie isn't in control of his own emotions, nor is he in control of his own actions. He's been blinded by all the pain he's endured and can now only see through the veil of rage. Upon seeing the message, Terry started suspecting that Willie was the one behind the mysterious events, so he paid him a visit at Juvenile Hall. During their conversation, Willie inadvertently made a remark about the trash gym, so Terry threw a glass of water at him, forcing him to reveal his telekinetic powers. The room was under surveillance, so when the guards barged in to apprehend Willie, he realized it was useless to keep up the charade, so he busted out. Willie was once again free in the world amongst its innocents. And this is where that veil of rage would come back into play, as instead of just trying to lay low and start anew, Willie made his way to Hamilton Hill High School, which had just been closed in fear of more attacks. Willie then went after Nelson, and the two exchanged a few blows. Even though he was more muscular, Willie still had to resort to his powers to dispose of Nelson. Afterwards, Willie made an advance on Blade, however, the get-together was interrupted by Batman, who tried to knock him out. Willie then unleashed his wrath on Batman and tried to kill him. However, Willie ultimately lost control of his powers after being hit by a batarang and got himself struck by a flying tree. Willie was then arrested and brought back into his lonesome captivity, where he was strapped with a power damper that rendered him harmless. And that would mark the end of Willie Watt. Willie is a character that you can actually feel bad for, as he wasn't meant to become this murderous criminal, and the two to blame for Willie's turn into a villain is his abusive father and Nelson. They pushed him to the edge of no return and left him with the only one option: to jump, and in doing so, lose who you once were, who you once could have been, resulting in the rage-driven Willie that we see before us. I would have loved an episode that showed Willie having a redemption arc, as he truly didn't deserve the treatment he was given. If he could have had a normal, non-abusive life, Willie most likely would have turned out just fine. So it's sad to see that he'll never have that chance to redeem himself and become something and someone better. But now, moving on to his design and voice actor. Willie's design is actually very simple and also matches the same color scheme as the Golem. Willie's styled bowl cut also adds to his awkward character, seeing as the haircut itself is a little awkward. and Willie's voice completes the overall nerd aesthetic that they were aiming for. And speaking of Willie's voice, Willie Watt was voiced by Scott McAfee, and for those that didn't know, he voiced Chris Carlisle in Batman the Animated Series, the Boy in The Bump in the Night, as well as Littlefoot in The Lands Before Time 2, 3, and 4, and many other great roles. So huge shout out to Scott McAfee.
You really should label the things you own. I do.
Terminal, aka Carter Wilson, was a model student at Hamilton Hill High School who led a secret life as the leader of a gang of jokers. The reason for his villainy is actually unclear, and here's why. We could assume that Carter acts out in his alter ego as a form of rebellion against his mother, who has been putting constant pressure on him to, quote, do better in school, even though he's far from a failing student. However, we could also assume that Carter commits these criminal acts as Terminal for the pure enjoyment of it all. While Carter is under his guise as Terminal, we're shown a truly evil and sadistic side of Carter. And this evil and sadistic side of Carter seems to be the most honest, not only with himself, but also with others. It could just be his heightened emotions that has him acting out this way and has him speaking his mind more, but regardless, this side of Carter appears to be the true Carter, seeing as he's able to say what he wants to say, be who he wants to be, and not say what he's told to say and be who he's told to be. Another thing that kinda tells us that Carter is truly evil is the fact that he's able to commit the acts that he does with ease. Any kind of person with morals, remorse, regret, sympathy, and empathy would not be able to commit the acts that he does without any issues. But with that brief summary out the way, let me go ahead and quickly discuss how I'll break down the episode that I'll be going over, with that being Hidden Agenda. Like always, I'll just be specifically focusing on the scenes that involve Carter, who I'll now just start calling Terminal. This might result in some skipping within the episode itself, but that's just for the sake of staying focused on Terminal. With all that said, let's get right into Hidden Agenda. The episode begins with Terminal and his gang terrorizing a random civilian. This minor attack quickly turned into attempted homicide, and they would have been successful had Batman not intervened. After their attempt fails, Terminal says he's going home to crash, and his lackey Trey makes fun of him by saying Terminal needs his beauty rest. So Terminal, not wanting to be made fun of, grabs Trey and dangles him off of the building. Terminal then tells Trey not to make fun of him and drops him from the building. Off rip, this goes back to what I was saying about how Terminal is actually evil, and while in this guise, he shows his true sadistic nature. Unlike someone such as Willie Watt, Terminal always had this evil side to him laying dormant, waiting to be unleashed. And again, it's unknown what actually caused him to turn into a violent person. It could have been the lifelong pressure from his mother, but what's more likely is Terminal was just always like this, always having the thoughts and urges to commit these criminal acts, but just waited until he had what he thought was a good enough excuse to act out. The next day at school, the GAT scores came in and Terminal got the second best score, with the top score going to Max. This upset Terminal for a few reasons, but the main two reasons are because 1, he knows his mother will belittle him for not getting the top score, and reason number 2 is Terminal isn't that fond of losing. Terminal then goes home, and as expected, his mother tells him how he's not doing good enough. He tries to tell her that only one other person got a better score, but she still stands by her previous statement. After his mother leaves, Terminal starts putting his disguise on and calls Trey, informing him about a job. Terminal and his gang then go to Hamilton Hill High School, where the gang trashes the school and Terminal attempts to change the scores, but to no avail. The next night, Trey and the other lackeys distract Batman while Terminal attempts to kill Max with reprogrammed school robots. This scene, and the next one involving both Terminal and Max, really goes to show how demented Terminal truly is. Rather than finding a way to hack into the system and change the scores, he picks the violent option and attempts to kill Max. This lets us know that the violent option is an option that he's quick to take, as he already wants to indulge in his violent nature. However, like always, Batman enters the school at the last second and saves Max. Later on, Terminal and his gang stalk Max to a park where they make their presence known. Terminal then goes on to terrorize Max while making remarks about the GAT score and how he has personal reasons for wanting her gone. So again, this moment really shows Terminal's violent nature, as he's now brought a gun into the mix and is trying to kill Max with said gun in cold blood. The fact that he's able to just easily decide that he's going to kill Max and a random civilian in the beginning of the episode tells us that Terminal wasn't really ever a good person. After a short brawl, Batman and Max defeat Terminal and his gang of Jokers. Terminal would then be arrested and placed in Juvenile Hall, where we would never see him again, marking the end of Terminal, aka Carter Wilson. Well, for the show at least. Terminal would come back for the Batman Beyond comic, Volume 2, Issue 12, where he basically becomes Two-Face. However, we won't be diving into that comic. So, unlike Willie Watt, you can't really sympathize for Terminal, as he's truly a murderous criminal, and it wasn't necessarily his home life, nor was it the same kind of abuse that Willie endured that drove Terminal to become the criminal that he's known as. However, even with him not being a redeemable person, I still wish he was used in more episodes. But now, moving off of the life and personality of Terminal and on to his design and voice actor. Terminal's design, like most, is simple yet effective. He dons a stained and ripped up straitjacket with a long black wig and wears face paint that makes him look like a skeleton. I truly love his design, and that definitely plays a part in why I wish he was used in more episodes. But now, moving on to his voice actor, with that being Michael Rosenbaum, who yes, voiced Ghoul in Return of the Joker. Michael Rosenbaum also voiced Deadman in Batman Brave and the Bold, as well as the Flash in the movie Justice League Doom, and many other great roles. So huge shout out to Michael Rosenbaum.
How's that for breaking news?
Tigress, Ramrod, and King Cobra, all whose true identities are unknown, are Dr. Abel Cuvier's test subjects and loyal followers within the episode Splicers. Sadly, nothing is really known of their lives prior to becoming Splicers, and we truthfully don't get to see a lot of their personalities, which is why this video is going to be styled a bit differently. I was originally just going to be talking about Tigress, but seeing as she only talks 2 times throughout the entire episode, I figured it was better to just talk about all 3 of the followers. Now, like always, there might be, and not even might be this time, there will be skipping within the episode itself, but that's just for the sake of staying focused on our 3 villains of the day. So with that ever so brief summary out the way, let's dive right into Splicers. The episode begins with Chelsea showing off her new eyes after being spliced. Chelsea then hands out business cards from the Chimera Institute, suggesting others to go and try it. And this is where we'll do our first skip within the episode. After some time, Terry goes to meet Dana at the Chimera Institute, and while on the train, he encounters both Ramrod and King Cobra. This encounter goes to show how arrogant and aggressive they both can be. Ramrod breaks the TV, and King Cobra then tells the scared passengers that Splicers are the future and there's more or less nothing they can do to stop them. However, after a short brawl, Ramrod and King Cobra make their escape. As I said, this small encounter mostly just shows how arrogant and aggressive they both are. They truly believe that with their new abilities and form that they're better than the normal civilians, and that they can't be beaten nor can their movement be stopped. So skipping ahead again, back at the Institute, Terry and Dana are going through the possible DNA that she'll be spliced with, and it's within this scene where we get our first look at Tigress. Unlike Ramrod and King Cobra, Tigress is much more composed. However, that don't mean she doesn't have a temper to match the others. She's just better at hiding it. And skipping ahead yet again, deeper in the Institute, Dr. Cuvier is injecting Ramrod with more of the splicing serum. During this scene, we see Ramrod react to the injection with pleasure. What we can take from this, and something he says later on, is that Ramrod has a deep desire and hunger for power. And would you look at that, we're skipping ahead again. After incapacitating Batman, Ramrod, King Cobra, and Tigress track down DA Sam Young, who's trying to shut down the splicing experiments, and the three Splicers attempt to kill him. During this encounter, Ramrod makes a comment about how the Commissioner is looking good. This implies that he's had run-ins with her before, however, because of his new look, she probably doesn't recognize him. Tigress then jumps into the conversation by saying she won't be looking good for long, and then pounces on the Commissioner. This goes back to what I was saying about her having a temper that matches the others. She may be more composed, but she still has an aggressive side that she enjoys to let out. After Tigress pounced on the Commissioner, King Cobra grabs Sam Young and holds him with a tight grip, waiting for the order to kill him. Ramrod then tells King Cobra to break Sam Young in half, at which point Batman enters the fight. Once in said fight, Batman gets outnumbered, which causes him to start his transformation into Man-Bat. Oh yeah, forgot to mention, when Batman got incapacitated back at the Institute, Dr. Cuvier injected him with Bat DNA. Vampire Bat DNA to be specific. After Batman starts to transform, Ramrod, King Cobra, and Tigress all make their escape. Would you believe me if I said we're skipping again? I know, right? Shocking. So anyways, Batman gets cured and tracks down the Splicers alongside Ace. At the hideout, Ramrod is being scolded by Dr. Cuvier for not killing Sam Young. Soon after, Tigress is alerted by Batman's scent and the three Splicers prepare for attack. Once Batman enters the building, the three of them jump Batman with a coordinated attack. King Cobra then tells Batman that they could smell his human stench from a mile away. Now, I know I haven't said a lot about King Cobra, but that's truthfully because there's just not a lot to say about him. But with this comment, we can assume King Cobra views humans as trash, which is why he wanted to become a splicer to begin with, so it would rid himself of falling in the same category as the humans he appears to hate. The fight continues with Ramrod and Tigress teaming up again to attack Batman. King Cobra then goes for the gun that has the cure for their splicing, but Batman intervenes, knocking him down and curing him right after. Tigress then hits Batman with a flying kick and rushes at him, however, Batman reacts and shoots her with the cure. Ramrod then asks Batman what he did to her, and after he gets his answer, he proceeds to tell Batman that he's not going back to being a nobody. This is what I was referring to earlier in the video, as this is the other moment that shows Ramrod's hunger and desire for power. He's become so attached to being stronger and faster that he no longer even sees being human as an option, simply because he feels lesser than others when he is normal, or human, if you will. However, before Batman can just shoot him with the cure, the gun jams and Ramrod rushes at Batman. Batman then flips Ramrod by the bull ring, which rips it out and is able to cure him afterwards. And now we're skipping again, but this will be the final skip that we take within this video. After Batman defeats Dr. Cuvier, who I'll talk about eventually, the three Splicers, Ramrod, King Cobra, and Tigress, are all arrested. As I said in the beginning, there's not much known about them, so there's truly not much else to say. So now, we'll dive into their designs, 2 voice actors, and 1 voice actress. All of their designs are very, and I mean very, simple. What really brings their designs to life is the splicing that they've done to themselves. Tigress does have a more notable design, as it just looks better and goes with her theme. The same applies to King Cobra. Ramrod would probably have the weakest design, at least in my opinion. But seeing as there's not much else to say in this department, let's go ahead and move on to the 2 voice actors and 1 voice actress. Ramrod was voiced by Ice-T, who truly needs no introduction. But if you didn't know, he's a famous rapper and he plays Detective Odafin Tutuola on Law & Order SVU. King Cobra was voiced by Timothy Dang, who played Fu in both Full Metal Alchemist The Final Alchemy and Full Metal Alchemist The Revenge of Scar. And Tigress was voiced by Cree Summer, who also did the voice of Max Gibson. Cree Summer was also the voice of Venus in Scarface The World Is Yours, which I've done a story explained video on that you should check out. And Cree Summer also voiced Dr. Penelope Young in Batman Arkham Asylum. So huge shout out to all 3 of them.
I do the same thing you do.
Sorry, pal. Not even close.
Payback, aka Kenny Stanton, is a vigilante set out to avenge neglected children, as he himself is also a neglected child. Kenny's father, Dr. Stanton, is a therapist who runs the Gotham Youth Counseling Center, where he spends a great amount of time helping troubled kids. And this is where our problem lies, as by doing so, he ended up neglecting his own child. And because Kenny felt neglected, his mind started to collapse and he began searching for ways to obtain his father's attention. Tired of being dumped to the care of Howard Lewis, the center's librarian and sculptor, Kenny turned his rage on those who were bullying or abusing teenagers. Kenny put on a 6-foot-tall exoskeleton suit and stole Lewis's laser hilt to use as a laser whip, dubbing himself Payback. He also believed that if he solved the problems of his father's patients, that he'd finally have more time to spend with him. These actions that he takes are both selfless and selfish. There's a part of Kenny, who I'll now just start calling Payback, that is sticking up for the neglected and abused kids as no one else will, and because he relates to them. However, the other part of him, or the main reason for doing all this, if you will, is to gain his father's attention and to begin the relationship that he's been wanting with him. But now, with that brief summary out the way, let me quickly go ahead and discuss the episode that I'll be going over and how I'll break it down. The episode we'll be looking at today is titled Payback, Go figure, and like always, there may be some skipping within the episode itself, but that's just for the sake of staying focused on Payback, the villain, not the episode, just to clarify. So with that out the way, let's dive right into Payback. The episode begins with Payback paying a visit to the Jean's Age store after Drew, another kid that's in the counseling center, gets told to stay for overtime. Payback locks the store's door and proceeds to walk towards Warren, the store manager. After throwing the cash drawer that Warren tries to give to Payback, Warren begins to run away and Payback approaches Drew, telling him to stay there and that he'll be safe. So to just quickly get this out the way, this scene is our first look at Payback's motive, and it does a good job at showing both sides of his mindset. As I said in the summary, a part of Payback is genuinely attacking Warren for him disrespecting the kids that work for him, as he wants to do good and help those that are like him. But the other part is doing this as a desperate cry for attention and is lashing out due to his uncontrollable rage. This split in his mind was caused by the collapse and corruption of his mental, meaning even the part that genuinely wants to help the kids and that is perceived as good will go to extremes and ultimately lose sight of what's actually right and wrong. Payback then approaches Warren and tells him why he's attacking him. After Warren apologized, but before Payback can strike him down, Batman enters the fight. Payback then tells Batman that he is his new ally and that he does what Batman does. This again not only goes back to him wanting to help the other kids, but it also shows how he compares what he does to the same justice that Batman serves, which again goes back to his mind being corrupted and him losing sight of what true justice is. After a short fight with Batman, Payback makes his escape. So, skipping ahead just a tad, Terry goes to the Gotham Youth Counseling Center and it's there where he meets both Dr. Stanton and Kenny Stanton. During this encounter, Kenny asks his dad if they can play a game or catch a movie together, but his dad simply replies with,
Kenny, there are so many kids with problems, big problems. I wouldn't be much of a doctor if I didn't do everything I could to help them.
which results in Kenny feeling neglected once again. It's truthfully sad to see and hear his dad say this to him, and for him to follow it up and basically say that his son's problems aren't real problems makes it that much more sad. And skipping ahead once again, after Batman misidentifies Payback, he sees the real Payback on the news in the middle of another attack. And it's during this attack where we see Payback going to the extremes I was talking about as he tries to kill both Duane and his new girlfriend by causing them to drive off of a cliff. The reason for his attack on Duane is for him cheating on Trina and treating her horribly beyond just the cheating. Before they fall to their deaths, however, Batman saves them and places them back on the road. A chase then ensues, with it coming to a short fight. During this short fight, Payback tells Batman that he knows how kids think. A fire is then started when Batman throws his batarangs at Payback and one of them hits Payback's whip, causing it to ignite the forest. Payback then makes his escape. And now, we're at the final skip that we'll take within this video. The next day at the counseling center, Terry complains about how Bruce treats him and how he thinks that he'll never be good enough for him. Terry also mentions that Bruce will be attending a party at a new hotel, and this was simply a trap that Payback unknowingly walked right into. Payback arrives at the hotel and begins his attack on Bruce, who is in the elevator. Payback tells the other Gothamites that they can leave and that his business is with Bruce Wayne. Payback then tells Bruce that he's a mean old man, and Bruce responds with, "Yes, and what are you?" Which Payback responds with,
"Your worst nightmare."
Payback then goes on to break the elevator, sending it and Bruce down to the bottom floor at a rapid speed. Bruce hits the emergency brake, and Batman flies in to secure Bruce's safety and to handle the situation. Payback continues his assault, cutting a support beam trying to crush Bruce, but fails. When Batman tries to confront Payback, the structural damage causes the floor to fall out from underneath him. Batman then flies down and saves Payback, and Payback is unmasked as Kenny Stanton. While Kenny is being taken away by the police, Dr. Stanton realizes that because he was so busy, he kept dumping Kenny onto Lewis, ultimately ignoring and neglecting him. He then notes to Bruce that Kenny's motives was that he thought if he solved all of his patients' problems, then his father would have more time to spend with him. And that would mark the end of Payback, aka Kenny Stanton. The episode was a story on neglect, and it actually did a decent job at handling that premise. Well, except for the whole turning into a rageful vigilante to gain your father's attention part. Other than that, it did a decent job. But anyways, I honestly wish we would have seen more of Payback, as just like Willie Watson or Carter Wilson, I feel like his story has so much untapped potential, especially if he ever actually became a good guy. There's so much they could have done with him if they just explored his character a little bit longer. But moving off of the life and personality of Payback and onto his design and two voice actors. Normally, I would talk about both Kenny and Payback's designs, but seeing as Kenny's design is rather plain and we only see it for a few moments, we'll just talk about Payback's design. And Payback's design is actually a reference to the Phantasm in Mask of the Phantasm. The choice to base it off the Phantasm's design was honestly a brilliant one, as it not only makes Payback's design more notable, but it also makes you appreciate the Phantasm's design a little more than you already did. But now, let's move on to the two voice actors. The voice of Payback is done by Bill Figurbaki, and I'm terribly sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but Bill also voiced Howard Lewis within the same episode. This is yet again another callback to what they had done in the movie Mask of the Phantasm, with the Phantasm having the same voice actor as Carl Beaumont. The same trick and reference was also used in the movie Return of the Joker with Joker and Jordan Price. Bill Figurbaki is also the voice of Patrick Star in SpongeBob SquarePants. Then you have Kenny Stanton, who was voiced by Adam Wiley, who played Ezekiel in Children of the Corn 5, Fields of Terror, as well as Brad Langford in Gilmore Girls and Grandpa Max in Ben 10. So huge shout out to both Bill and Adam.
I told you. They tease me. They call me Rat Boy.
Patrick Fitz, aka the Rat Boy, is a runaway teen who lived in the sewers because of his grotesque rat-like looks. He decided to live in the sewers so he could avoid being bullied. Rat Boy would go on to become a stalker, kidnapper, and murderer. He would stalk girls who he felt like would understand how he feels and who wouldn't mind his appearance. He would then kidnap them and bring them back to his lair within the sewers. After they reject Rat Boy, like any person would after they had just been kidnapped, he has his horde of rats kill them. With that brief summary out the way, let me quickly go over the episode that I'll be discussing and how I'll break it down. The episode we'll be looking at today is titled Rats. Fitting, isn't it? Now, I will be skipping over some things within the episode, but like always, that's just for the sake of staying focused on our creep of a villain for the day. And with all that out the way, let's dive right into the episode Rats. The episode begins with Chelsea, Dana, and Max eating lunch while listening to a news report about giant man-eating rats. Chelsea notes to Max that a student named Sally went missing last month and that maybe she was taken by the rats. This off-rip lets us know that Rat Boy has indeed been stalking, kidnapping, and killing for quite some time. Skipping ahead a bit, Dana and Terry get into an argument, so nothing new there, and while Dana is getting into her car, she sees a flower on the seat with the note that says, "I'll be there for you." Dana believes it to be from Terry, but in reality, Dana had just acquired a new stalker. This episode really leans into the stalking, and in turn, it seriously adds to the creepy factor. This first case might seem harmless, but when you think about how Rat Boy knew Dana and Terry were in an argument, it suggests that he was stalking them while they were in school, which is most likely his hunting grounds. And that's truly sick to think about. It's also possible that Rat Boy was stalking Dana even before planting this first flower. Rat Boy might have seen some of their previous arguments and just decided that day at school was the day to set his twisted plan in motion. Skipping ahead again, after Terry inadvertently stands up Dana, she sees another flower in an alley along with the same note. While standing in the alley, two giant rats emerge. Dana runs, Dana trips, Dana falls, and while the two rats approach Dana, Dana passes out. She then awakens in Rat Boy's godforsaken lair, and Rat Boy tells her that the rats are his friends, along with Rat Boy trying to comfort Dana by giving her jelly beans and whatnot. Silly stalker, nobody wants your jelly beans. Afterwards, he calls her by her name, and when Dana asks how he knows it, he replies with, "I know everything about you." This goes back to what I was saying about him stalking her way before ever planting that first flower and note. After Rat Boy shows Dana his garden of flowers that he specifically developed, Dana tells Rat Boy that she wants to go home. Rat Boy, being the obsessed, creepy stalker that he is, says, quote, "I won't let you leave. You belong here with me." He then says that he'll get anything that she wants. Dana, trying to come up with a way out, says that she wants some of Rhino's famous chili and grabs a hold of Rat Boy, attempting to leave for the establishment. However, Rat Boy pulls his arm back, saying that he'll go get the chili and demands Dana to stay there. Something to note is that when Rat Boy tells Dana that he won't let her leave and that she belongs there with him, you can feel the air in that smelly little sewer change. It's truly an unsettling moment. So, double skip incoming. after Ratboy goes to get Chili, and after Dana tries to escape the sewer but ultimately fails, Ratboy comes back with said Chili and brings Dana back to the main hub of the sewers. It's here and now where his true sadistic, twisted, and evil nature fully shows, as after Dana lashes out, calling Ratboy a head case, he says that she's no different from the others, and then goes on to explain how he's been doing this with the other kids that the quote world didn't want. Dana then asks Ratboy what happened to the other kids, and Ratboy simply answers with,
They don't make fun of me anymore.
which obviously heavily implies that he killed them all, or at the very least had his rats kill them all. Either way, the already creepy situation that Dana is in just got a whole lot more sinister. After Ratboy grabs a hold of Dana, Batman enters the sewers and a fight is initiated, and this is where we'll take our final skip within this video. After the fight and during Batman's escape with Dana, a fire is started when Dana accidentally drops a hockey stick that's been lit on fire into a pit of toxic waste. The fire causes an explosion, and soon after, we hear a news report about how there's been no casualties, meaning either Ratboy's body was turned to nothing but ash, or he actually somehow managed to escape. Regardless, that would mark the end of Ratboy. There's truthfully not much to say about Ratboy other than that he's seriously one creepy and sick individual. This episode, along with its main villain, did a great job at making the viewer's skin crawl. It's definitely one of the darker episodes of Batman Beyond, seeing as obsessive stalking, kidnapping murderers do exist, and that was the main focus of this entire episode. But moving off of the sick and twisted life of Ratboy and on to his design and voice actor. Ratboy's design is actually very simple, but like most other designs that we talk about, it's still very effective. The rat-like features truly help him stand out and also adds to his overall unsettling presence. As for his clothes, I mean, he just wears some regular Joe attire, so nothing too special there. And now we'll move on to Ratboy's voice actor, with that being Taron Noah Smith, who played Mark Taylor on the show Home Improvement, and Brian Ferris in the movie Little Bigfoot 2: The Journey Home, as well as a few other great roles. So huge shout out to Taron Noah Smith.
There you are, Mr. Tully. You're late for your meeting with Mr. Powers.
Mr. Fix is Derek Powers' personal assistant and henchman. Normally, I would dive into the past of Mr. Fix, but little is actually known of Mr. Fix's past. He's not very talkative, but he still remains threatening nonetheless. Mr. Fix would serve as both a chauffeur and the muscle to Derek Powers. Mr. Fix is only but a cold, heartless brute who gets mass enjoyment from fighting and or killing. And with that ever so brief summary out the way, let me quickly go over the two episodes that I'll be looking at and discuss how I'll break them down. The episodes we'll be looking at are titled Rebirth Part 1 and Rebirth Part 2. There most definitely will be some skipping within the episodes themselves, but like always, that's just for the sake of staying focused on Mr. Fix. And with all that out the way, let's dive right into Rebirth Part 1. Truthfully, the only things worth note within this first episode is his first appearance where he drags Tully off, and the other noteworthy thing that happens within this first episode is that Mr. Fix was the one responsible for killing Warren McGinnis. However, Mr. Fix, covering his tracks, makes it seem like it was an attack done by the Jokers. Now, I say these are the only noteworthy things simply because he's only on screen for a very, and I mean very, short amount of time. Like, we're talking possibly 30 to 45 seconds in total within this whole episode. But back to Mr. Fix himself. The act of killing Terry's father and covering it up not only shows us just how brutal he is, but it also shows us he's used to doing these kinds of things. The way he covered his tracks suggests that he's not only been doing this for a while, but also suggests that he has serious skill in doing so. Mr. Fix also seems to get joy out of threatening and hurting people, which lets us know that it's his sadistic nature that drives him to be so brutal. I should also add that we actually wouldn't get told that it was Mr. Fix who killed Terry's father until the next episode. And speaking of the next episode, what a better time to move on to Rebirth Part 2 than now. This is where some actual depth is given to Mr. Fix, as he now has more screen time, and as I just said, it's within this episode where we figure out that it was Mr. Fix who killed Terry's father. But now, diving into the actual episode, we'll begin where Mr. Fix makes his first appearance. While Terry is heading to the GCPD to deliver the disc that was given to Mr. McGinnis, he's stopped by Mr. Fix and Derek Powers. Mr. Fix grabs a hold of Terry and begins searching his jacket for the disc. He then starts trying to force Terry into the limo, but Terry strikes a deal with Powers to be let go. After being let go, Terry pulls the disc out and throws it. He then proceeds to kick Mr. Fix and runs away. Skipping ahead, Terry steals the Batsuit and tracks Powers down to the Wayne Powers Tower. While listening in on the conversation between Powers and Egan's, Terry hears about how lethal the gas truly is. After Egan's leaves, Powers shows concern seeing as Terry is still alive. Mr. Fix tells Powers not to worry and then reveals that he is the one who killed Warren McGinnis. I should also note that during the meeting and whenever Mr. Fix brings up killing Warren, Mr. Fix is smirking. This goes back to what I was saying about him being cold and heartless. Mr. Fix is a ruthless brute devoid of any sense of morality or mercy. He truly takes great pleasure in hurting and killing others. It's almost as if that's what he believes his purpose to be. But now, skipping ahead once again, at the loading bay, Batman gets spotted and quickly confronts Powers and Mr. Fix. However, while Batman is talking to Powers and Mr. Fix, a guard in a forklift type machine knocks Batman away. Powers then tells Mr. Fix to get the hovercraft into the air, and Mr. Fix does just that. After a short little game of cat and mouse with Powers, Batman flies up to the hovercraft and grabs one of the wings. Batman then drags and throws two guards out of the hovercraft and enters said hovercraft, where a fight between Batman and Mr. Fix, who is now armed with electrified knuckle dusters, is initiated. However, the fight is anything but long, as after Batman punches Mr. Fix, he falls back and his electrified knuckle dusters smash into the control panel of the hovercraft. This causes him to not only be electrocuted, but it also causes the hovercraft to shut down and plummet into the water. And that would be the last time we would see Mr. Fix, as he would drown within the hovercraft. There's truthfully not much to say about his character, other than that he's a ruthless brute with a one-track mind that's set on violence. However, Mr. Fix will always be an important character, as he's Terry's Joe Chill. Much like Bruce, the death of Terry's father is what drove him to dig further into the situation as a whole, and it's also what caused Terry to become Batman. So, for that simple fact, Mr. Fix will forever be an important character, and even with there not being much else to say about him, he still plays a key part in the story of Terry McGinnis. But now, let's move on to the design and voice actor of Mr. Fix. His design is actually one of the simpler designs that I think is handled perfectly and works in the character's favor. However, the two things I'll highlight are his scar and his trench coat. The scar shows us that he's not afraid to get into a fight of any kind, as it was most likely done by a knife, and the trench coat is normally something that cold and ruthless people wear in shows like this, so it fits perfectly. As for the voice actor of Mr. Fix, he was voiced by the great George Takei, who played Hikaru Sulu in Star Trek the original series, the first ancestor in Mulan, and my personal favorite, Kaito Nakamura in the show Heroes. However, George Takei has starred in many, and I do mean many, great roles. So huge shout out to George Takei.
An out-of-control child, a parent's worst nightmare.
Dr. David Wheeler is an unscrupulous child psychologist who runs a therapy ranch for troubled kids. His practices are anything but appropriate as he full-on tortures said troubled kids. What makes it worse is that some of the kids aren't even real troublemakers, like Chelsea, who only sent an email to the principal expressing her concern for the other kids. Dr. David Wheeler's crimes consist of psychological torture, child abuse, brainwashing, false imprisonment, sensory deprivation, attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. With that brief summary out the way, let me quickly go ahead and talk about the episode that I'll be going over and discuss how I'll break it down. The episode we'll be looking at is titled The Last Resort, and there will be some skipping within the episode itself, but as always, that's just for the sake of staying focused on our horrible villain of the day. And with all that out the way, let's dive right into The Last Resort. While on patrol, Batman comes across Sean Miller in a high-speed chase with the GCPD. After tailing them for a while, Batman stops his pursuit after Sean gets caught, and later on, the chase forms part of a commercial for a new rehabilitation clinic for troubled adolescents. The clinic's founder, Dr. David Wheeler, reminds parents that the new laws are imposing strict punishments for the parents of truants and assures them that his methods can help the troubled kids become, quote, normal and well-adjusted. This would be the first time we see Dr. David Wheeler, and each appearance from here on out would only show more of his evil nature and his truly sadistic personality. Parents start sending their kids to the clinic, from the genuinely rebellious to the most minor of offenders. The clinic proves to be so popular that soon Hamilton Hill High School is nearly empty. Chelsea is sure the clinic is to blame and sends a protesting and concerning email to Principal Nakamura. The principal then tells Chelsea's father about the email, and he seizes on the excuse to send Chelsea to the clinic. Knowing that Chelsea is not, quote, troubled, Terry is suspicious at how readily the clinic admits her. This is what I was talking about in the brief summary about Dr. David Wheeler. Chelsea may be rebellious in some ways, but she's far from a troubled kid. What this moment and moments later on shows us is Dr. David Wheeler truly doesn't care about the kids being troubled at all, as at the end of the day, he just wants the kids to be his brainwashed drones. Troubled or not, he will take them and he'll torture them in horrific ways. Another thing of note is that him doing all of this to specifically kids and teenagers tells us that he has a specific obsession with said kids and teenagers. At the clinic, Chelsea wanders around and is rudely greeted by Sean. She tries to leave him and their conversation by going over to her friend, Adam Stepnick. However, Adam is totally unresponsive to her, and she notices that he's painting a blank canvas using a brush with no paint. Sean sneers that Adam is still under the effects of the ISO, then the kids are all hoarded into the quote classroom. Meanwhile, outside of the clinic, Batman is eavesdropping through the wall. The class consists of the students being forced to stand for hours on end while Dr. Wheeler yells at them about how worthless they all are and how he is the only one who can help them. One of the teenagers tries to speak out, but Dr. Wheeler has his guards drag him off to the ISO as punishment. These are some of the other moments I was talking about earlier that shows us Dr. David Wheeler having absolutely zero regard for the kids, as he only wants them around so he can turn them all into his drones. Bruce identifies Dr. Wheeler's methods as a form of brainwashing used by cults and sometimes on prisoners of war. Skipping ahead, back in the Batcave, Terry says they have enough evidence to go to the police, but Bruce reminds Terry that the suit recordings have no legal provenance, so Terry decides to go undercover as himself. Skipping ahead again, Terry is taken prisoner, and Dr. Wheeler says that if no one comes to get Terry, Wheeler's guards will do away with Terry after he gets his own ISO treatment. That night, Sean taunts Terry through the wall between their cells, describing the horrible experience that he's in for. However, Terry convinces Sean to cooperate with him so that they can escape from the ranch. This was not only the beginning of Terry's escape plan, but it was also the beginning of Sean's murder murder plan. Unbeknownst to Terry, morning comes, and the two are taken to the ISO chambers, but at Terry's signal, they attack the guards and manage to escape. Sean gets a hold of the master keycard and uses it to release all of the quote students from their cells. While all of the security guards are out trying to round up all of the students back to their cells, Terry finally retrieves his backpack and suits up. With Batman's help, the students are finally able to overwhelm the guards. And this is where Sean's plan would actually kick into effect, as Batman hears Dr. Wheeler pleading for mercy and sees Sean dangling him off of a high wall. Batman then pleads for Sean to stop, saying that he's now redeemed himself and that he's now a hero. Sean laughs this off and then drops Dr. Wheeler, forcing Batman to save him. What we can take away from this is, Sean was exacting his own form of justice for not only himself, but also for every other kid that Dr. David Wheeler has hurt. All of the quote students then run outside where the police and their parents have arrived. Sean, along with all of the guards from the clinic and Dr. David Wheeler himself, would then be arrested. And that would be the last time we ever saw Dr. David Wheeler. Well, at least in the show. He might have appeared in the comics, and if he did, feel free to let me know. But from what I saw during my research, it seems as if he only appears within this one episode. But anyways, what's there to say about Dr. David Wheeler? Well, he's genuinely pure evil and is seriously depraved, sick, twisted, and warped. He didn't just lack morals, sympathy, and empathy, he also lacked all humanity, leaving him as nothing but a hollow shell of only evil and negativity. But now, moving off of the life and personality of Dr. David Wheeler and on to his design and voice actor. I won't spend too much time on his design, as it's rather simple and there's just not much to say about it. He wears a blue and black suit, which really has nothing special about it. It's not bad or anything, it's just very simple. So we'll just leave his design at that. And now, we'll move on to Dr. Wheeler's voice actor. Dr. David Wheeler was voiced by the late great John Ritter, who voiced Clifford in the TV series, the movie, and the games. John Ritter also played Dr. Josh Parks in the movie Panic, as well as Bill in the movie Man of the Year. However, John Ritter has starred in many great roles, so huge shout out to John Ritter. And that about wraps up this video. If you made it this far into the video, I just want to go ahead and thank you. I truly appreciate all of the love and support y'all have been showing me. I'm horrible with words and expressing myself, but just know that it means the world to me and that I'm ever grateful. Also, like always, huge shout out to Mercenary X84 for still being a member. It's been nearly 4 months and they're still a member, which is absolutely insane to me. So again, not only a huge shout out to you, but a huge thank you to you. But with my ramblings finally out the way, it's been ugly, and I'll see y'all in the next one.